The solicitor's voice droned on through the grey afternoon light that filtered through the windows of the London townhouse. But Marcus Townsend, Duke of Thorncroft, had ceased listening several minutes prior. His attention had fixed upon a single phrase buried within the endless legal recitation, a phrase that seemed impossible and yet had been repeated now, 3 times, with increasing emphasis. The late Earl of Ravenswood, his father's sworn enemy, the man who had destroyed his family's shipping interests and driven his mother to an early grave through the stress of financial ruin, had left him everything. Every acre of Yorkshire moorland, every stone of the ancient manor house, every investment and holding that comprised the Ravenswood fortune now belonged to Marcus. The irony was so profound it bordered on cruelty. "Your Grace," the solicitor continued, adjusting his spectacles with nervous fingers, "there is one additional provision that requires your immediate attention." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his expression betraying nothing of the tumult within. He had perfected this mask of aristocratic indifference over the years, a shield against a world that had shown him little kindness despite his eventual ascension to the dukedom through a distant cousin's unexpected death. What provision could possibly add to this absurdity, Mr. Hartwell? The solicitor cleared his throat, shuffling through his papers with evident discomfort. "The late Earl had a daughter, Your Grace, Lady Selina Fairfax. She is 28 years of age and has resided at Ravenswood Manor her entire life. The terms of the inheritance stipulate that she is to remain there under your protection until such time as she marries or reaches the age of 30, at which point a modest settlement will be released for her independent maintenance." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. A daughter. Ravenswood had a daughter, and she came with the estate like some forgotten piece of furniture, a human being reduced to a clause in a legal document. "What is known of this Lady Selina?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Very little, Your Grace. The Earl kept her secluded from society. She has never had a season, never been presented at court. The household staff report that she is quiet and studious, managing the estate's domestic affairs since her mother's death some 15 years ago. She appears to have been largely overlooked by her father." The word overlooked struck Marcus with unexpected force. He knew something of being overlooked, of existing on the margins of a world that valued only those with power and position. Before his elevation to the dukedom, he had been merely the 3rd son of a ruined baron, scraping by on his wits and his determination to restore his family's honour. "I shall travel to Yorkshire within the Marcus declared, rising from his chair. "Have the household informed of my impending arrival?" The solicitor nodded, relief evident in his features at having discharged his uncomfortable duty. "And Lady Selina, Your Grace? Shall I send word regarding her situation?" "She will learn of her circumstances when I arrive." Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. "Mr. Hartwell, why did Ravenswood leave his estate to me? Of all people in England, why the son of the man he destroyed?" The solicitor hesitated, then withdrew a sealed letter from his case. "He left this for you, Your Grace, to be delivered only upon your acceptance of the inheritance." "I confess I do not know its contents." Marcus took the letter, noting the familiar Ravenswood seal pressed into deep red wax. He did not open it. Some revelations were better faced in solitude, away from curious eyes that might witness whatever emotion the dead man's final words provoked. The journey north took 3 days, during which Marcus had ample time to read and reread the letter that had travelled in his breast pocket like a burning coal. The words were seared into his memory now, each line a fresh wound reopened. "To the Duke of Thorncroft," it began, "if you are reading this, then I am dead, and you have accepted what I have offered. You will wonder why. The answer is simple. I destroyed your father not out of malice but out of desperate necessity to protect a secret that would have destroyed us both." Your father discovered that my wife, before our marriage, had borne a child out of wedlock, a child she gave away to protect her reputation. That child was your mother. We are connected by blood, Thorncroft, though neither of us knew it until the damage was done. I ruined your father to silence him, to protect my wife from scandal, and in doing so, I destroyed my own soul. The fortune I leave you was built on that sin. Use it to do what I could not, to live with honour. But I ask one thing in return. My daughter, Selina, knows nothing of this history. She knows only that her father was a cold and distant man who barely acknowledged her existence. I was afraid, you see, that if I loved her as she deserved, I would somehow taint her with my guilt. Protect her, Thorncroft. She has had little enough kindness in her life. Perhaps you can give her what I could not. Marcus had crumpled the letter after the first reading, thrown it into the fire. Then he had retrieved it before the flames could take hold, smoothing the paper with trembling hands. The truth it contained had shattered every certainty he possessed. His mother had been baseborn, the cast-off child of Ravenswood's wife. His father had discovered this secret and threatened exposure, only to be destroyed by Ravenswood's ruthless response. And now Marcus inherited everything, including the daughter of the man who had ruined his family, to protect this shameful secret. The carriage wheels crunched on gravel as they passed through the gates of Ravenswood Manor. Through the window, Marcus observed the house emerging from the mist that clung to the Yorkshire moors, a sprawling structure of grey stone that seemed to grow from the landscape itself. It was beautiful in a stark, uncompromising way, all sharp angles and tall windows that reflected the sullen sky. The staff had assembled on the front steps to greet him, a small army of black-clad servants standing at rigid attention. But Marcus's gaze moved past them, searching for the one figure he had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Lady Selina Fairfax. He found her at the end of the line, standing slightly apart from the others, as though uncertain of her place in this new order. She was not what he had expected. Where he had imagined a pale, retiring creature crushed by years of neglect, he found instead a woman of quiet dignity. Her gown was dark and modest, her brown hair arranged simply without the elaborate curls that fashion demanded. But it was her eyes that arrested him as he descended from the carriage, eyes of an unusual amber shade that met his gaze directly, without the downcast submission he might have expected. "Your Grace," the butler intoned, stepping forward. "Welcome to Ravenswood Manor. We are honoured by your presence." Marcus acknowledged the greeting with a curt nod, his attention still fixed on the woman who had not moved from her position. The wind caught at her skirts and pulled loose strands of hair across her face, but she made no move to adjust them. She simply waited, watching him approach with an expression he could not read. "Lady Selina," he said, stopping before her. She curtsied, a precise, practiced movement. "Your Grace. I hope your journey was not too arduous." Her voice was low and pleasant, without the breathless flutter that so many women affected in his presence. There was something almost challenging in her composure, as though she dared him to find fault with her. "The journey was tolerable," he replied. "I trust you have been informed of the arrangements?" "I have been informed that I am now your dependent," she said, a slight edge entering her tone, "to be housed and fed at your pleasure until such time as I can be disposed of through marriage or age. If that is what you mean by arrangements, then yes, Your Grace. I am fully informed." Marcus felt a flicker of surprise at her frankness. The household staff shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to such direct speech from their young mistress. Before he could respond, she continued, "I should also inform you that I have no intention of being a burden. I have managed this household since I was 13 years old. If you will permit me to continue in that capacity, I shall endeavour to stay out of your way." She was magnificent, he realised with a start. Beneath the plain gown and severe hairstyle was a woman of steel, forged by years of isolation and indifference into something far stronger than anyone had bothered to notice. "That will not be necessary," he said, and watched something flicker in her amber eyes, something that might have been disappointment or relief. "I mean," he amended, choosing his words carefully, "that while your assistance with household matters would be welcome, I do not expect you to remain invisible. You are not a servant, Lady Selina. You are the daughter of an earl, and you will be treated accordingly." The silence that followed his words was profound. Lady Selina stared at him as though he had suddenly begun speaking in tongues, her composure cracking for the first time to reveal a flash of raw vulnerability beneath. "I do not understand," she whispered. "You do not need to understand," he replied, surprised by his own gentleness. "You need only believe that things will be different now. Come, show me the house. I should like to see what I have inherited." The tour of Ravenswood Manor took the better part of 2 hours, during which Marcus observed far more than architecture and furnishings. He watched Lady Selina move through the halls of her childhood home with the ease of long familiarity, her fingers trailing along banisters and door frames with unconscious affection. She knew every room, every servant, every quirk of the ancient structure, and she shared this knowledge with a quiet pride that spoke of deep attachment. "The library," she announced, pushing open a set of heavy oak doors to reveal a cavernous room lined with shelves reaching to the ceiling. "My father rarely came here. He preferred his study on the east wing." "But she hesitated, glancing at him uncertainly. "You may speak freely, Lady Selina," Marcus prompted. "I spent most of my life here," she admitted, crossing to a window seat worn smooth by years of use, reading, studying, trying to understand a world I was never permitted to enter. The housekeeper used to scold me for neglecting my needlework, but my father never noticed what I did or did not do. As long as I was quiet, I was free to pursue my own interests." Marcus surveyed the collection with growing respect. The library of Ravenswood Manor was exceptional, containing volumes in Latin, Greek, French, and German, alongside the expected English texts. Works of philosophy, natural science, history, and literature filled the shelves in organized abundance. "You read all of these?" he asked, though it was hardly a question. "Most of them," she replied, her voice carefully neutral. There seemed little else to do. He selected a volume at random, a treatise on agricultural reform that he recognized as a recently published work of some influence. "What did you make of this?" he inquired, genuinely curious. Lady Selina's eyes lit with an enthusiasm she could not entirely suppress. "His proposals for crop rotation are sound, but he underestimates the resistance of tenant farmers to change. I wrote to him once, anonymously, suggesting that any reform must begin with education rather than edict. He published my letter in his second edition, though of course he assumed it came from a gentleman landowner, rather than." She broke off, colour rising in her cheeks. "Forgive me. You did not ask for a lecture on agricultural theory." "No," Marcus agreed, returning the book to its shelf. "But I find I should very much like one." Her head came up, surprise evident in her expression. "You are mocking me." "I am not." He moved closer, near enough to see the uncertainty warring with hope in her amber eyes. "Lady Selina, I am beginning to suspect that you have been grievously underestimated by everyone in your life. I do not intend to make the same mistake." The days that followed established a pattern that neither had anticipated. Marcus, who had planned to assess the estate and return to London within a fortnight, found himself lingering at Ravenswood Manor, drawn into conversations with Lady Selina that stretched from breakfast through dinner and into the evening hours. She was brilliant, he discovered, possessed of a mind that had been sharpened by solitude and study into something formidable. She could discuss parliamentary reform with the same facility as she debated the merits of various schools of portraiture, and her observations on the management of the estate revealed a practical intelligence that many stewards would envy. You should have had a season, he remarked one evening as they sat in the library, a fire crackling in the hearth against the autumn chill. You should have been presented, shown to society. My father did not consider it necessary, she replied, her tone carefully devoid of bitterness. He had no sons, no heir to continue the family name. A daughter was merely an inconvenience to be managed, not a prospect to be launched. What she did not say, but Marcus understood nonetheless, was that she had been invisible to her own father, as overlooked and undervalued as the furniture she had spent her life among. The injustice of it burned in his chest with unexpected intensity. "Things will be different now," he said, repeating the words he had spoken on the day of his arrival. "You will have a season if you wish it, a proper wardrobe, the opportunity to move in society, as you should have done years ago." Lady Selina looked up from the book in her lap, her expression unreadable. "Why?" she asked simply. "Because it is your right as a lady of birth and breeding. Because you deserve the chance to find a husband, a home of your own, a life beyond these walls." "Why?" she repeated, and this time he heard the steel beneath the question. "You owe me nothing, Your Grace. My father destroyed your family. If anything, you have cause to despise me and everything connected with the Ravenswood name. Yet here you sit, offering me kindness I have done nothing to earn." "I ask again, why?" Marcus set down his glass of brandy, considering how much truth to reveal. The letter from her father burned in his memory, its secrets too devastating to share, at least not yet, not until he understood better what he felt and what he intended. "Because I am not my father's enemy," he said finally. "Because the sins of the past generation need not define the present." Because he paused, searching for words that would not betray too much. "Because I look at you, Lady Selina, and I see someone who has been alone for far too long. I understand loneliness. I would not wish it on anyone." Something shifted in her expression, a softening of the wariness that had guarded her features since his arrival. "You speak as though you know what it is to be overlooked." "I was the third son of a ruined baron," he replied, his voice quiet with old pain, "invisible to society beneath the notice of those with rank and fortune. When I inherited the dukedom, everything changed, but the memory remains. I have not forgotten what it feels like to be dismissed as unworthy of attention." Lady Selina set aside her book, folding her hands in her lap with careful precision. "Then perhaps we understand each other better than I realized, Your Grace." "Perhaps we do," he agreed. "And perhaps, given that understanding, you might consent to call me by my name." "My name is Marcus." She hesitated, clearly aware of the impropriety of such familiarity. "I am not certain that would be appropriate." "And I am certain that I do not care," he replied, surprising himself with the vehemence in his voice. "We are to live under the same roof for the foreseeable future, Lady Selina. Surely we can dispense with excessive formality when we are alone." "Very well," she said slowly, testing the word as though it were a foreign language. "Marcus. And you must call me Selina." The weeks that followed were unlike anything Marcus had experienced. He had come to Yorkshire expecting to assess his unexpected inheritance and make arrangements for its management from afar. Instead, he found himself reluctant to leave, drawn into the rhythm of life at Ravenswood Manor and the company of its most compelling resident. Selina proved to be a revelation. Freed from the constraints of her father's indifference, she blossomed into a companion of remarkable depth and wit. She rode with him across the moorland, her seat on horseback as confident as any gentleman's, pointing out boundaries and features of the estate with the knowledge of one who had studied every map and record in the library. She dined with him each evening, their conversations ranging from the philosophical to the practical, from the deeply personal to the deliberately absurd. She made him laugh, Marcus realized one night, watching her face light up as she recounted the tale of a particularly disastrous attempt to teach herself Italian from books alone. When had he last laughed like this, freely and without reservation? He could not remember, but there were shadows too. Sometimes he caught her watching him with an expression of wary uncertainty, as though waiting for the moment when his kindness would reveal itself as a mask for something darker. She had been taught by her father's neglect to expect nothing from the men in her life, and old lessons were not easily unlearned. And there was the matter of the letter, the truth it contained that hung between them like an invisible wall. Marcus found himself unable to speak of it, unable to explain to Selina that they were connected by bonds of blood as well as circumstance, that her grandmother's shameful secret had destroyed his family even as it bound them together across generations. The weight of that unspoken truth grew heavier with each passing day. The situation came to a head on an evening in late autumn, when the first hints of winter frost touched the moors and the nights grew long and dark. They had dined together as usual, but something in Selina's manner was different, a tension that Marcus could not identify until she set down her wineglass and faced him directly. "I have received a letter," she announced, her voice carefully controlled, "from my cousin Harold. He will be arriving tomorrow to discuss matters of inheritance." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Harold Fairfax, the Earl of Ravenswood's distant cousin and next male relation, had made no secret of his fury at being passed over in the old Earl's will. He had dispatched several threatening letters to Marcus's solicitors and had been making noise in certain London clubs about contesting the inheritance. "I was not aware you corresponded with your cousin," Marcus said evenly. "I do not. This is the first communication I have received from him in years. He writes to inform me that he intends to propose marriage." Marcus's glass froze halfway to his lips. "Marriage?" "Yes." She met his gaze steadily, though he could see the rapid pulse beating at her throat. "He believes that by marrying me, he can strengthen his claim to the estate. Apparently there is some legal precedent for challenging an inheritance when the previous owner's daughter is not adequately provided for. By marrying me, he removes that vulnerability from any case he might bring." "And you," Marcus forced out through lips that had gone strangely numb. "What do you intend?" "I intend to refuse him," Selina replied. "Harold is a cruel man with a taste for gambling and a reputation for mistreating those beneath his power. I would sooner enter a convent than become his wife. But I thought you should be aware of his intentions. He may try to cause trouble for you regardless of my answer." The relief that flooded through Marcus was so intense it nearly staggered him. In that moment, he understood with devastating clarity that his feelings for Selina had long since passed beyond friendship or guardianship into territory far more dangerous. He loved her. The realization struck him like a physical blow, robbing him of breath and reason alike. He loved her quiet strength and her fierce intelligence, her hidden warmth and her stubborn pride. He loved the way she laughed when she forgot to be guarded, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of books or ideas, the way she had carved out a life of dignity in the face of relentless neglect. He loved her, and she was about to receive a proposal from another man. "Selina," he said, his voice rough with emotion he could no longer entirely conceal. "There is something I must tell you." But before he could continue, the butler appeared in the doorway with news that would shatter the fragile peace they had built. "Your Grace, Lady Selina," he announced, his face grave. "A carriage has arrived. Mr. Harold Fairfax is here, a day early, and he insists upon seeing you both immediately." Harold Fairfax was everything Marcus had anticipated, and worse. He swept into the drawing room with the aggressive confidence of a man who believed himself entitled to whatever he desired, his small eyes darting around the space with proprietary interest. His clothes were fashionable but slightly worn at the edges, betraying the financial strain that gambling debts had imposed upon his circumstances. "Cousin Selina," he declared, ignoring the conventions of proper greeting. "You look well. Life in the country must agree with you." His gaze slid to Marcus with barely concealed hostility. "And the illustrious Duke of Thorncroft. I had not expected to find you still in residence. It is, after all, my residence," Marcus replied coldly. "And as Lady Selina's guardian, any matter concerning her welfare is properly addressed to me." "Guardian," Harold scoffed. "Is that what we are calling it? The tongue has other words for an unmarried man residing with an unmarried woman of good family. Whatever your intentions toward my cousin, Your Grace, I am here to offer her a more respectable alternative." Selina had gone pale but remained standing, her chin lifted with the dignity that Marcus had come to admire so deeply. "I have already informed Your Grace of my cousin's proposal," she said, her voice steady. "And I have given him my answer. I will not marry you, Harold. Not now, not ever." Harold's face flushed an unpleasant shade of red. "You would refuse me? A woman of your age and circumstances with no fortune, no prospects, no hope of any other offer. You should be grateful anyone would have you." "That is quite enough," Marcus interrupted, stepping forward to place himself between Selina and her cousin. "Lady Selina has given you her answer. I suggest you accept it with whatever grace you can muster and take your leave." Harold's eyes narrowed. "This is your doing," he spat. "You have poisoned her against her own family, keeping her here like some kept woman while you decide whether to elevate her to your bed or cast her into the street. I demand satisfaction for this insult." Marcus felt cold fury settle over him like a mantle. "If you wish to call me out, Fairfax, you are welcome to try. But I should warn you that I was considered one of the finest shots in my regiment before my elevation to the peerage. I should hate for your mother to lose her only son over a matter that could be resolved far more simply." Harold hesitated, clearly weighing his desire for dramatic confrontation against the very real possibility of death. "What simple resolution do you propose?" he demanded. "You will leave this house tonight and never return. You will cease any and all attempts to contest the inheritance or harass Lady Selina with unwanted attention. In return, I will refrain from exposing the truth about your gambling debts and the questionable methods by which you have attempted to satisfy them. Yes," Marcus added, seeing Harold's face go pale, "I am aware of the IOUs you have forged and the young men you have cheated at cards. The evidence is quite comprehensive. Do we have an understanding?" For a long moment, Harold stood frozen, hatred warring with self-preservation in his expression. Then, with a snarl of impotent rage, he turned and stalked from the room. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house like a gunshot. In the silence that followed, Selina released a shaking breath. "Is it true," she asked quietly, "what you said about his debts and forgeries?" "It is true," Marcus confirmed. "I had him investigated when his threatening letters first arrived. He is a desperate man, Selina, and desperate men are dangerous. I could not allow him to threaten you." She looked up at him, her amber eyes bright with an emotion he could not identify. "You protected me." "Of course I protected you. Did you think I would do otherwise? I did not know what to think." She wrapped her arms around herself as though cold, though the fire still burned warm in the hearth. "I have had very little experience with protection, Marcus. No one has ever stood between me and anything before." The vulnerability in her voice pierced his heart. He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just short of touching her, though every fibre of his being yearned to pull her into his arms. "Selina," he said, her name a prayer on his lips, "there is something I must tell you, something I should have told you weeks ago." She looked up at him, waiting. "I came here expecting to despise everything connected with your father's name. He destroyed my family, or so I believed. But I have learned since that the truth was far more complicated." He drew a breath, steeling himself for the revelation that could change everything between them. "Your father left me a letter, explaining why he did what he did. My mother, it seems, was the illegitimate daughter of your grandmother, given away at birth to protect the family reputation. Your father discovered that my father knew this secret and meant to expose it. He ruined my family not out of malice, but out of desperate fear. Selina's face had gone very still. "We are related," she whispered. "By blood?" "By blood. Your grandmother was my mother's mother. That makes us what? Cousins of some degree?" "I do not know the precise term," Marcus admitted. "I only know that when I read that letter, I was overcome with rage and grief and a strange, terrible hope. Rage because my family's destruction was built on secrets and lies. Grief because my mother never knew the truth of her origins. And hope because he paused, his voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. Hope because it meant I was connected to you, Selina, bound to you by ties that predated my arrival at this house by generations." She was silent for so long that Marcus feared he had ruined everything, that the revelation of their shared blood had destroyed whatever tender feelings might have been growing between them. Then she spoke, her voice trembling. "That is why you have been kind to me. Because we are family." "No," he said fiercely. "I have been kind to you because you deserve kindness. I have stayed at Ravenswood because I cannot bear to leave you. I have protected you because the thought of anyone causing you harm makes me want to tear the world apart." He took her hands in his, feeling them tremble against his palms. "Selina, I love you. I love you not because we share blood, but despite it. I love your mind and your strength and your stubborn refusal to be diminished by years of neglect. I love the way you see the world and the way you make me see myself. I know this is complicated. I know there are obstacles and objections and 100 reasons why this could never work. But I had to tell you, whatever happens next, you needed to know the truth." Tears were streaming down her face now, though whether from joy or sorrow he could not tell. "Marcus," she breathed, and the sound of his name in her voice was the sweetest music he had ever heard. "I have loved you since the moment you told me I was not a servant. Since you asked to see my home and listened to my opinions as though they mattered. Since you looked at me and saw someone worth seeing." He pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest as though she might disappear if he loosened his grip. She fit perfectly there, her head tucked beneath his chin, her hands clutching the lapels of his coat. For long minutes, they simply stood, breathing together, two souls that had wandered alone for far too long finally finding their harbour. "Selina," he murmured against her hair, "will you marry me?" She pulled back just enough to look up at him, her amber eyes shining. "But the scandal," she whispered. "Society will talk. They will say you have married beneath you, that you have taken your ward to wife, that our shared blood makes the match unsuitable." "Let them talk," he replied, echoing the words that had become their private refrain. "I have never governed my life by society's expectations. I see no reason to begin now, particularly when doing so would deny me the only happiness I have ever truly wanted." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away the tears that still traced silver paths down her cheeks. "Selina Fairfax, you have been overlooked and undervalued for far too long. I intend to spend the rest of my life ensuring you know exactly how precious you are. Will you let me?" Her smile, when it came, was like the sun breaking through clouds after a long winter. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, Marcus. 1,000 times yes." He kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that deepened into something fiercer as years of loneliness found their answer in each other's arms. Outside, the wind howled across the moors, but within the walls of Ravenswood Manor, two hearts had finally found their home. They were married 6 weeks later in the ancient chapel on the estate grounds, with only the household staff and a few trusted friends in attendance. Selina wore her mother's wedding gown, altered to fit her slender frame, with the Thorncroft sapphires at her throat, a gift from Marcus that had belonged to his grandmother. the woman whose illegitimate birth had set this entire tangled history in motion. The ton, of course, was scandalised. A duke marrying his ward? A woman 28 with no fortune, no beauty, no connections beyond the very man she was wedding. The whispers flew from drawing room to drawing room, each retelling adding new embellishments to the tale. But Marcus and Selina cared nothing for whispers. They returned to London for the season as husband and wife, presenting a united front to a society that had expected either tragedy or farce. Instead, they found something entirely different. The new Duchess of Thorncroft was a revelation. No longer constrained by her father's indifference or the isolation of the country, Selina bloomed in the hothouse atmosphere of London society. Her intelligence and wit made her a favourite at dinner parties. Her genuine kindness won her friends among the patronesses of Almack's. Her obvious happiness with her husband silenced even the most persistent gossips. "They see you now," Marcus murmured one evening as they danced at a ball given in their honour. "All of London sees what I saw from the first moment," Selina smiled up at him, her amber eyes warm with love. "What do they see? A woman who was worth waiting for. A duchess who earned her title through strength of character rather than accident of birth. My wife," she laughed, a sound of pure joy that drew admiring glances from those around them. "And what do you see?" "Everything," he replied simply. "I see everything." 3 years later, on an autumn evening not unlike the one when Marcus had first arrived at Ravenswood Manor, the Duke and Duchess of Thorncroft sat in the library that had once been Selina's refuge from a cold and indifferent world. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the shelves of books that now bore the marks of 2 voracious readers rather than one. Between them, in a cradle carved from Yorkshire oak, slept their daughter, the Honourable Elizabeth Townsend, named for Marcus's mother, whose illegitimate birth had begun the tangled chain of events that led to this moment. "She has your eyes," Selina observed softly, watching the baby's peaceful slumber. "And your stubbornness," Marcus replied with a grin. "Already she refuses to sleep unless read to. I cannot imagine where she learned such behaviour." Selina swatted his arm playfully, then leaned into his embrace as he pulled her close. The library, once her sanctuary from loneliness, had become something different now, a place of warmth and family, of shared dreams and quiet contentment. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Inheriting everything that came with your enemy's estate, including me?" Marcus pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Selina, inheriting you was the greatest gift I have ever received. Everything else, the houses and the lands and the fortune, means nothing compared to what I found in this room. A woman who was worth waiting for. A love that was worth fighting for. A home I never knew I needed until I walked through that door and saw you standing there, fierce and proud and utterly magnificent." She turned in his arms, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "I love you, Marcus Townsend. I love you for seeing me when no one else could be bothered to look. I love you for giving me a life I never dared to dream of. I love you for being the answer to every prayer I never knew I was praying." He kissed her then, soft and slow, a promise renewed each day of their lives together. Outside the windows of Ravenswood Manor, the moors stretched endlessly toward the horizon, wild and beautiful and unchanging. But within these walls, something had transformed. A house that had witnessed generations of secrets and sorrows had finally become what it was always meant to be. In the cradle, little Elizabeth stirred and sighed, dreaming the innocent dreams of childhood, unaware of the complicated history that had brought her parents together, knowing only that she was loved, fiercely and completely, by 2 people who had found in each other the home they had searched for all their lives. The Duke had inherited his enemy's estate, and with it, a daughter who became his destiny. In seeking to understand the past, he had found his future. In protecting a woman the world had overlooked, he had discovered the greatest treasure of all. And in the end, the sins of one generation had given way to the redemption of the next, as love, patient and enduring, proved itself stronger than hatred, stronger than pride, stronger even than the weight of history itself. They had been overlooked and undervalued, both of them, cast aside by a world that measured worth in shallow terms. But they had found each other in the margins, and together they had written a new story, one of courage and compassion, of second chances and unexpected grace. A story that would echo through the halls of Ravenswood Manor for generations to come, whispered by servants and remembered by children. The tale of a duke and his duchess who proved that it is never too late to be seen, never too late to be loved, never too late to find your way home.